I'm a dude, and I'm inviting you to join me on a podcast about brews.
Does that include stouts?
Yes, of course it includes stouts. Like I was saying, join us every Saturday on the journey into...
Wait a minute. Do you guys do anything about like IPAs?
Yes,
like that?
yes, we do IPAs.
Okay.
Yes. Anyway, join us on the Journey into Comics Network for Brews with Dudes.
Whoa, hey, have you guys ever... Do you care if I bring some Zima on?
Yes, I care if you bring Zima. Zima doesn't count. Zima's... Dr. Dongo. Anyway, join us every Saturday for a podcast that delves into the craft brew world.
The following is a Journey into Comics Network production.
You may fire when ready.
In a galaxy far, far away,
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
the Journey into Comics Network Patreon presents
It's an energy field created by all living things.
the Podcast Menace, a podcast 100% dedicated to Star Wars,
Which energy shall thou first?
with your hosts, Brandon Stone and Tyler McLaughlin.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Welcome, everyone, to the debut episode of the Podcast Menace. This is the only podcast on the Journey into Comics Network 100% completely dedicated to the fandom and love of Star Wars. Thank you for joining us today on this, the day of our free premiere here on the network. And, of course, I am one of your hosts, Brando, and the other lovable, gracious host of this show, my good buddy Tyler.
What's up, everybody?
Welcome to the show, everybody. This show has been in the making for almost a month or two now.
Well, total time is like 3 months.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit longer than that.
It's been kind of stewing in my head ever since sort of like we got done doing the Star Wars episode on the Journey to Comics show when we reviewed Last Jedi. And it seemed like across the network, not just us, but almost every show in some respect following The Last Jedi talked about The Last Jedi. And during The Last Jedi is when I'm like, man, I want to talk more Star Wars stuff more often. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, you know what? Tyler really knows his shit. He's like, I could talk to Star Wars with a lot of folks, but it's like, you're the one dude that I've met so far that can really 100% challenge my knowledge as far as like, holy crap, dude, I don't even know if I know that 100%.
I feel like that so when we did the Last Jedi kind of review right after the movie, it was really late at night, and we had all had a long day at that point anyway. I feel like if we had a little bit more kind of resolve or just energy more than anything, we would have still been talking Star Wars at like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning.
There was so much to digest with that movie. Seeing that movie again helped me further like my own opinion of that movie, because that movie is so divisive among fans.
Right. And then, while we were dissecting The Last Jedi, we started talking about themes and parallels and all the other stuff in the total Star Wars universe as a whole, and how that tied in and influenced The Last Jedi. And then, like all of us always do, we ramble a little bit, we get on tangents, and it's like all of this shit is relative.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I can talk Star Wars all day, every day. It has been, I have a lot of hobbies. I have a lot of things that that I consider myself a major fan of. Things like Mass Effect, of course, the Tolkien stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm way behind on Game of Thrones, so I can't really say that for sure. Definitely a fan. But Star Wars always eclipses everything. And Star Wars in itself was influenced by so many big things in previous times. You listen to George Lucas, and he's like, well, Flash Gordon. I saw Flash Gordon, read Flash Gordon when I was a kid, and it's like, that was one of the biggest things that influenced him and made him create all this stuff anyway. And Star Wars, not just on the storytelling or science fiction level, it influenced cinematography and special effects. And Star Wars is a part of, I don't want to just say American culture because it's influenced worldwide, but it's a part of everything. Any major movie in the last 20 years has had to look at what Star Wars did in 1977 and say, this was big. And with CGI and a lot of the stuff now, we've moved on from practical special effects, but
ILM, I mean,
absolutely,
Star Wars gave us ILM,
absolutely,
and ILM is responsible for so many other movies, like throughout the Spielberg movies.
Mm-hmm.
You can just look at almost any movie that has big special effects. Not every single one of them, but even if they're not like associated with Lucas or Spielberg or any of these other companies, you'll see that ILM may have done work on it.
Absolutely,
they've definitely became a big effects house. But Star Wars is entrenched in film history and in worldwide history as far as like culture and pop culture. It was something that nobody expected this thing to have become what it became.
Well, especially Star Wars kind of set the precedent for taking, I don't want to say no-name actors, but either unknown or actors with a very small following and blowing them up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, every couple of years we'll have, whenever I think about this, I think about Sam Worthington. He came in with Avatar, Clash of the Titans, Wrath of the Titans. He had very few films in a very short amount of time, and it took him straight to the top, with Avatar especially. So that as far as the actor side of the filmmaking industry, it gave all of us people who are like, hey, man, I think I could do that. You look at Harrison Ford, he had what? American Graffiti, and that's maybe it.
Yeah,
and he was a carpenter.
Yeah, he wasn't even supposed to be in the movie. He
That's
was
right.
just doing table reads or test ratings for other actors. He was just the placeholder.
Yep.
And then you think about the other actors who tested for Han. Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell's an amazing actor.
Absolutely. Well, especially in the time period. In the 70s and the 80s.
And that was right before he blew up.
That's right.
He was another kind of young and up-and-comer at the time. Walken, of all people, it would have been crazy to hear it, but even back then. But, Star Wars did blow up, and it did become something bigger, and we kind of hope the same thing for this podcast. We
Absolutely.
definitely wanted to start this thing going up, and what you guys are hearing today is the first official episode. It is free on the network across podcast services all across the galaxy, and the rest of these episodes are going to be on the Journey to Comics Patreon, and they're going to be a part of the exclusive content deal for $3. And the reason for that is that we're trying to really kind of grow ourselves and really help support the network, and we thought, what better way than to help give you guys, sell you guys on it, than to give you guys even more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not only for $1 you get early access, but for $3 you get this show exclusive every single month, and there's more shows coming down the line, and you get early access to every single show.
That's
right.
As
soon as it's done, it's there. So your podcast feed is going to be chock full of so much stuff. All every single day there's something uploaded.
Quality stuff.
Exactly.
Not just stuff.
Yeah.
We all put a lot of time and effort. We all have busy lives. We're all working adults. We have families. We put a lot of time into effort into doing our best at these at doing these podcasts. So $3 a month would definitely help us out.
Oh, dude, $3 a month. I mean, what's that? Like a cheeseburger and fries,
Right.
So definitely consider that, and we hope you do kind of come along and join on our Star Wars journey with us over on the Patreon. But for now, sit tight, and we're gonna break down some of the stuff that's been going on lately in Star Wars. Of course, we are right in the smack dab in the middle, in between The Last Jedi and Solo. And it's a really neat place to be, because we still don't know really what Solo holds for us. It is something that has made a lot of fans nervous due to all the rumors and conjectures and all of the problems and the director shifts and tone shifts, whatever. And then we're coming off of Last Jedi, which, as I said before, was a very divisive movie across the fan base, which, honestly, that I like that. Because when everybody loves something, that's cool. But then when something is divisive, that's when you know it's good.
Well, when you and I sit down and we talk about Last Jedi, though we hold a lot of the same opinions, you and I can each break down the same scene, and we take entirely different things away from it.
Sure.
People have been rabbling in the streets, and shortly after the movie premiered, people were sending Rian Johnson death threats, and obviously Star Wars fans are some of the most powerful and numerous fans of anything. I don't think that a bad Star Wars movie or a bad if my opinion of a Star Wars movie is bad, I don't think that justifies sending somebody death threats. But that just goes to show how strong our fan base is, and we expect greatness.
It's funny because we are such a fickle group.
Mm-hmm.
We came off of the original trilogy and then had the original trilogy sort of force-fed down our throats with changes.
Right.
And changes that were happening all the way until he sold the rights, literally. Like the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray copies were my most irksome out of all of them. That's my own thing. I don't need blinking Ewoks. I don't need additional Vader lines when the scene doesn't call for him to say anything.
Right. Really, the only thing that I didn't nitpick was Jabba's inclusion in A New Hope when they're in Mos Eisley. That was really the only one of those that I didn't nitpick. I don't need Vader yelling. Unnecessary. I don't need, like you said, blinking Ewoks. That was weird as shit, especially from, when I was a kid, I had the original trilogy on VHS. I also had the Ewok Adventure kind of double pack. And then, the Ewok cartoons, the droid cartoons on VHS. I had anything that I could have Star Wars, I had it.
Right.
And in those movies, the Ewoks didn't blink. So it's like, I watched the original trilogy, then I watch the Ewok Adventures, which, you and I could sit and just trash it as adults. But when you're a kid, that's extremely entertaining. It's fun, and as a child, the Ewoks are so entertaining. You're a little kid, they're a little like forest bear thing.
Yeah, well, it definitely suits the kids.
Absolutely,
well.
and then
directed towards.
And then you're when I was a late teenager, early adult, and I saw blinking Ewoks for the first time. I'm like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Threw me off. It threw me off.
They don't need to blink, and then you really. You hone in on their eyes and they're blinking, and then you start to look at all the rest of your face, and you start to nitpick. They're just. I don't need to nitpick Ewoks. It's unnecessary.
This is something that I read or heard recently, and I can't remember where I heard it or even where I came across this at, and it had to do with George Lucas and him talking about the thing that he created.
Mm-hmm.
Why we're here today, and he left directing and writing. I mean, I guess he still wrote. He did the Indiana Jones movies and Howard the Duck. Be that as it may. But it got to a point later on in his life where he's like, I kind of want to revisit Star Wars, and I feel like there's more stuff that I could do. And one thing that George has always wanted to do is put something to film that he would like to see.
Mm-hmm.
Something that he feels either hasn't been done or that he could put his own stamp on.
Right.
And so when he went to go to like Phantom Menace, and he go watch the documentary that came on the Blu-ray for that or whatever. It's a great documentary, and it might even change like how you view that movie, especially when you get to see him and some of his other close confidants having screened the movie, and they're like, "Oh man, yeah." So this is not exactly kind of what I wanted it to be.
Well, and I was, I'm one of the I guess, sorry few, I guess. That's how I'm going to put that actually enjoys the prequel trilogies.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people shit on it and it's unnecessary. It's not unwarranted, but it's unnecessary. It's Star Wars. It was somebody who waited 30 years, not 30 years, but like 30 years from the original to come back to something that they created and breathe life back into it. Because the late 90s, in the lead up to Phantom Menace, other than the Kenner, the toy lines, the clothes, all the merchandise, Star Wars had kind of gone dark.
A little bit. and part of the getting the crowd riled up again in '97 was like the special edition re-releases.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, hey, let's get this ball rolling again. Let's refamiliarize yourself with it. And we're
Right.
going to go back in with Phantom Menace. So he came in and he did 3 more Star Wars movies. And I both like and dislike several things about them. I definitely can watch them. Just because I say that Attack of the Clones is my least favorite or worst Star Wars movie does not mean it's not worth a watch.
Absolutely.
It's just the one I look forward to the least.
Yeah, I mean, I could pick apart Attack of the Clones all day, but the action sequences were good. The special effects were good. Obviously the dialogue was very dry and rough a lot of times. Hayden Christensen, young actor, coming into his own.
Again, giving young actors a chance.
If you were a young actor and your agent said, "Hey, I got a movie for you to possibly look at. Read over this script and see what you think." Oh, what is it? Oh shit, it's Star Wars. Like, that's big.
See, and a lot of times, like, they wouldn't actually get the full script.
Right.
They would have to go and then read stuff that may not even be from the script, and then they wouldn't get the script until they'd already signed on.
Right.
And then I don't fully blame Hayden for his stuff.
I absolutely don't either.
Because it's George giving him the direction. But more on to what I was going to say, though. George made his movies, and he wanted to make more movies. He wanted to go back, and he's like, okay, I made these 3 movies. We're going to do some Clone Wars stuff. He had ideas in how he wanted to continue post-original trilogy. What he went with when he sold to Disney, he goes, here's my stuff and my ideas. The thing is that he goes, I wanted to make more Star Wars movies, but everybody would yell at me. It's like, all they do is yell at me. It's like, can you imagine? He created it, and they're like, you don't know how to do it. And he's like, I want to make some more. In a sense, he got bullied out of his own creation.
Right.
And then, of course, you had the documentary, People versus George Lucas, and how really hardcore fans pushed him away from the thing that he created and loved and has such a big part of his life. And it ultimately probably led to his decision to, like, all right, I guess if I can't do anything more with it, then why do I still have it?
Right. And he was smart to sell it to who he did.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because, as a creator, it's like, well, like you put it, he got bullied out of his own creation, so he basically got guilted into getting rid of it. And it's like, well, if I absolutely have to get rid of it, who better, who could I give it to that would be better than Disney? Mm-hmm. Arguably the greatest storytelling organization in history.
Yeah.
Nobody has written more stories. Nobody has produced more movies.
Adapted stories.
Right, absolutely.
And then, of course, with them acquiring different studios, even the Marvel Studios, and how they're the machine that feeds it, but then they also have put the right people in charge. So having Kathleen Kennedy, who is always like kind of George's right-hand girl, and she's in charge of Lucasfilm. She's the head honcho. Whatever she says goes.
Right.
And so when she is unhappy with the direction of Solo, and she goes, no, this isn't what our plan was. Or Lawrence Kasdan, the writer, he's like, you guys are trying to turn this into what it isn't.
Right.
And then the directors are like, well, we want to make our movie. And they're like, you're making our movie.
That's right.
Remember that. It's like, we're giving you so much level of freedom, and you're allowed to do that, but this is a Lawrence Kasdan script. This is a Kathleen Kennedy produced movie.
Well,
your
and
job is to adapt it.
You and I, you made the comment the other day about Lawrence Kasdan, like, this guy knows what the hell he's talking about.
Yeah.
When this guy puts when this guy puts pen to paper, you listen, you do what's on the paper. You might ad-lib and adjust a little bit. I mean, that's your creative freedom. Mm-hmm. But this guy knows Star Wars almost better than anybody.
Oh, he has the credentials. He's written, 3 of the biggest Star Wars movies of all time?
Yep. He does not need to justify what is on that paper to you as director. You are there to put what's on the paper into motion and picture. That's it.
Well, think about it. Think about the other directors and the other producers. Of course, The Empire and Jedi, George was producer, so he already knew the story.
Right.
He wrote the story. Lawrence wrote the script. So now it's up to the director. I can't remember the director for Jedi, but Irvin Kershner did Empire. That's my ultimate favorite movie in the whole thing, which is a lot of people's.
Right.
But I know Irvin, and I've seen behind the scenes stuff, and they went forward. For him to be that fundamentally upset and disagreeing with the direction, for him to go to Kathleen Kennedy and say, I don't want that. It had to have been such a stark difference to his vision, because for him to be able to, because he's the writer and you have the director and then the producer, and it's like, the writer doesn't always get what his vision is out there. It's going to be the director's take on that. And that's pretty sure he's like, yeah, man, that's a lot of the stuff is director's discretion as far as how stuff is delivered, presented, all this kind of stuff. Because this is my framework. I give you the framework, but in a way, with what it was being said about how they were trying to do a more Thor Ragnarok approach, where they were like, well, here's the framework, but then if it's goofy and it works, let's go with that.
Well, and that's part of what I was so worried about when Solo was first announced. I saw, and I was happy to see that we have an unrecognized, up and coming actor playing Solo, kind of a good homage back to the original trilogy and Harrison Ford as a whole. And then I start to see reports coming out about the movie, and the biggest report that I saw was, and it wasn't bashing this kid, but it was. I'm really bad with names, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the guy that's playing Solo, not that he is a bad actor, but he is unfit to fill this role the way that the directors were trying to push it. Mm-hmm. And Kathleen Kennedy and Disney were bringing in the best acting coaches in Hollywood, and this guy, I keep calling him a kid, but he's not a kid, he's a guy. This guy was not responding well to the coaching. And a couple of the coaches who remained anonymous said this guy's uncoachable. And I was extremely disappointed. That's a gut punch.
Yeah.
Because Solo is, we'll say, obviously top 3 most recognizable. Luke, Vader, Han Solo. Leia's there, the honorable mention. But he is top 2 fan favorite characters of all time. He's the lovable anti-hero in the beginning, and then, makes his full transition into becoming the hero in the end. And it's like, good God, what are they letting happen to this character, to this, what this story could be? Why are they letting this happen? And then it goes even deeper. Ron Howard comes in and takes over, and at first it was like, Ron's going to do a 20% of the movie reshoot. Cool, he's going to tidy some stuff up. He's going to kind of get it back on track.
Do some Joss Whedon stuff.
Absolutely.
Actually, and it might have turned out that Joss even did more than what was originally.
I'm sure we'll get the full story on that someday. But then, like 2 weeks later, I saw another report. It was pretty much verbatim, but then it said, well, Ron has decided to shoot 50% of the movie, reshoot 50% of the movie with Kathleen's blessing. Because she, of course, was incredibly unhappy with where this movie was at the time. And then maybe 5 weeks later, I saw another report by the same writer that said, well, Ron has decided to reshoot the entire movie. They're eating, this amount of budget to reshoot the movie because what they had shot, even with Ron Howard's reshoots, was unwatchable. And as a Star Wars fan, it's like, good God. A Star Wars movie, as bad as Attack of the Clones was, as bad as fans say the original, or the prequel trilogy was, and it's unwatchable, it's like, I'll wait for that to come out on Blu-ray. I don't want to waste my $8 to go see that in theaters if it's that bad.
Right.
So everything that I have heard from that point until now, with Ron Howard's reshoots and how this guy, the guy that's playing Solo, is responding to Ron Howard as a director is nothing but positive. It's, we went from down in the swamp and now we're back on the mountaintop. So with the Super Bowl trailer or teaser and then the trailer the following morning, and then I told you a couple hours ago I saw a new image released on Twitter. It's got Han standing, it looks like, in the entryway to a bar or, a Mos Eisley type cantina, and he's kind of got an aggressive stance, and he's got his hand right next to his blaster, the old DL-44, and it's really, really dark behind him, and then the only light in the image is coming from the bar in front of him. So that was kind of a really neat teaser. If I was Disney and Lucasfilm, going into the month of May, we're almost in April now, as this is being recorded. We're almost in April. You've got arguably or possibly a movie that could eclipse every other film on all-time, opening day movie sales with Infinity War. That would be the time, if you're going to get one more trailer out, get the fans really riled up and excited, because they did that, they did that for the most part with the Super Bowl trailer. Mm-hmm. That trailer is fantastic. But if you really want to give people, if you really want to justify people spending $8 on a movie ticket and $40 on concessions.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's the time to put out a trailer. And I think they'll do it. I don't want to say 100% for sure, because I'm obviously not a part of Lucasfilm or Disney, but that's nothing but good business. If they crank out another trailer, give us some different scenes, maybe tease a little bit, throw an Easter egg or two in there.
Yeah,
that's the time to do it.
Well, do kind of like you did with Infinity War. Like a month before its release,
mm-hmm.
You get some of the same scenes with different, maybe a shot right after. So it's just a little bit different, but then it also just sprinkles in just so much more and gives you the hype.
Well, it sucks you down the rabbit hole.
Exactly.
It's like, especially for us, a couple people that weren't excited for Solo,
mm-hmm.
In the last couple months, and then you see the Super Bowl trailer, and it's like, oh, I might change my mind about this.
It definitely got my attention. I'm not sure if I'm super excited. I had the same air about me right now as I did about Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't hyped to see it, and maybe that'll change once we get past Infinity War, since that I'm so hyped for that right now.
Absolutely.
And maybe it'll change, but it's not the fact that I'm dreading it, but it's also yeah, man, I'm gonna go see that. It's not that same hype that I had for Force Awakens or even Last Jedi. Because for me, for Rogue One, it was the unknown. It's all these unknown characters. What's going on here? For this, though, it's going to be the test. It's going to be you're going to sit down and go, this could go great, or it could go bad. And odds are, for me, it's it probably will be somewhere right in the middle. It's probably because there's no. I will be surprised if this film really comes out and it's grand slam,
mm-hmm. because
of all the problems,
right?
And there's no way that doesn't lead to tone issues, or as you said, Howard comes in and refilm stuff, and that's obviously because he's sitting down getting handed him, here's this scene, let's try, and now he's got to try and piece together a film,
mm-hmm.
and then he's seeing what he has and going, okay, well, we can start telling this story. He's looking at the script and he's pushing, okay, well, I got this scene here, this scene here, this scene here. Okay, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. We got to put this over here. And then, so now he's trying to structurally put together a film. That has got to be so challenging and nerve-wracking for him, because, he's stepping into a big-time stress situation.
Yeah,
which is
no
hilarious, because he turned down doing Phantom Menace way back when.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, yeah, but why don't you do that? And he goes, I'm not going to be the guy that failed bringing back Star Wars.
That's right.
And now he's going to be, now it's back and it's doing great stuff now, but now he has quite the task ahead of him. I actually do have just a little bit here. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller left the film in June of 2017,
mm-hmm.
only 3 weeks away from finishing principal photography. They were almost done filming the original run of all this stuff. So apparently they clashed throughout the production, with Kathleen Kennedy, co-writer Lawrence Kasdan, and other Lucasfilm members over the direction and tone of the film. Miller and Lord had been encouraging improvisation and making overall comedic film against Kasdan's wish for them to follow his script. Eventually, they stepped away. And essentially, this year, this note that I have here said that Howard has reshot more than 80%. So there's very little of the original shots and takes that were kept. The guy that plays Han Solo, his name is Alden Ehrenreich. And he was the first actor to audition.
That's cool.
And the director said in July of 2016, while they liked a lot of the other actors who also auditioned, they said the first guy that we saw was best for the part, and that eventually led them to cast him. Also, another really cool trivia note, Woody Harrelson was picked over Christian Bale.
That's cool.
As Han Solo's mentor.
I didn't realize that Christian had drive or interest to be involved in Star Wars.
He's a huge Star Wars fan.
I knew he was a big fan, but I didn't know that he had any interest in actually getting involved in any of the franchises.
I've heard about that. I'm not sure whether or not Harrelson was picked over him or if Bale met with them and then they talked about it and he's like, well, maybe I'll step away from this one. But apparently, him and Kathleen Kennedy had talked, and there's room for their she's open to saying, hey, if we get the right part for you, maybe I'll give you a call.
I would like to see Christian Bale in Star Wars.
Well,
though I don't like him in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked many days about how Christian Bale is my least favorite Batman.
Yeah,
Christian is a fantastic actor. He has the ability to do a multitude of different things and actually do a good job of portraying emotions and tones and different things that a lot of people can't do. It's hard to get past the Batman voice for me and for a lot of people. I would love to see Christian Bale in a Star Wars movie of some sort.
I would love to. Well, because, so he did the Batman stuff, and he did a Terminator film in the middle of that.
I really liked that one.
I did too, but he was still so stuck in the Batman voice that whenever he was yelling, he was doing the Batman yell.
Right.
And, of course, I think back to, American Psycho,
mm-hmm.
and he also did The Prestige.
Right.
Great films, So he can definitely do some cool stuff. And I think having an actor with the accolades of Christian Bale, knowing that he was in those Batman films and big blockbuster films, is willing to put the time and effort in to either get in the right shape, learn your roles, learn your scripts, even get your hands dirty with some of the stunts, whatever.
Right.
That we have these newer Star Wars projects that were being thrown out you get one. Oprah's giving out Star Wars projects to everyone in the audience. Everybody gets a Star Wars project. And when you're having brand new Star Wars properties kind of prop up where you don't know what time frame, where they're going to be at, what are we looking at here? All new characters, all new stories. Having an actor like Christian Bale or other possible big-time actors, that's going to be part of the selling point, I feel, or what I would do. Hey, let's get Christian in and bring him in for this movie because they're not going. This isn't a Skywalker. This isn't a Vader. This isn't a Han Solo or even a Chewbacca or even the droids. There is no visible thing here that's other than lightsabers possibly that is going to say this is a Star Wars movie, and of course spaceships and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Especially if Solo flops.
Yes.
If Solo flops, I don't see the powers that be. And that rhymed, and I didn't intend that. But I don't see them saying, all right, we're going to pull Favreau, you can't have your Star Wars, whatever you're doing. I'm sorry. Game of Thrones dudes, sorry, give us that back. You're not, this was too bad. We messed up. We don't need all this Star Wars right now. If it flops, which I hope it doesn't, I don't think it's going to.
No. I think it's at least going to make its money.
Absolutely. But exactly what you said, yeah, you guys might not have enjoyed Solo, but check this new project out. Christian Bale's involved, maybe Chris Pratt. Some of the other big time actors right now, it's wow, they're doing Star Wars.
Think of all these dudes. Think of Chris Evans even.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are wrapping up on their Marvel stuff. And he's in good graces, and he's got people in Disney, and they're like, hey man, I know you're not, I know you're just getting off of these big franchises, but here's a script. tell us what you think. See if you're interested.
Well, look at like Chris Pine too. He's just done Wrinkle in Time. I don't know how that's doing in the box office.
Subpar, but
yeah,
sure.
from what I do understand, not very well, based on their expectations. I think anything released right now is kind of going to get eclipsed by Black Panther.
It has been. It's been. Dude, that movie is now the #1 rated superhero movie in domestically, at least. And
right.
It's. I don't know if it's going to get worldwide, but it's getting close.
Mm-hmm. So that's the bad thing for Disney. I think too many times they do something and they have all these really high expectations, which they should. They're Disney, and then it doesn't do just quite as well as they thought, and then they consider it a failure.
That's the same with a lot of studios, though, because look at when you look at some of the Warner Brothers DC stuff.
Absolutely.
Even with, Justice League is the worst performing film. And that is like out of like what I consider to be like the films other than Wonder Woman, one of the better ones as far as like being concise, telling a good story, having good characters, having a better script, having a better better performances. But then you have a movie like BVS, which had so much, it was so divisive. So many people like, yeah, this is an awesome movie. And then there's people who are like, this is the worst thing to ever come on the big screen ever.
Right.
They've ruined these characters. And I'm just like, I don't know about that. But then when it makes just $1 billion, and that's crazy to think of that. The movie made $1 billion, and they're like, yeah, it wasn't enough. It's a failure.
Well, when you have movie budgets that are like $800-900 million,
mm-hmm.
and then you only eclipse your total production costs by $100 million. Apparently, that's a failure. I would imagine making $100 million is a really enjoyable thing to do. So yeah, we're in a weird time in cinema as a whole, because it seems like to me, I saw Pacific Rim on Saturday.
Yeah.
IGN gave it a 6.5 out of 10. They're considering it a flop. A lot of reviewing kind of sources are considering it a flop. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was just as good as the first one. It did what it needed to do. It's a giant fighting robot movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've got our expectations set way too high on most of the stuff that we're watching, which we have that right as consumers. We expect a good product. But the budgets on all these major projects are just getting so astronomical. I don't know how, without any issues whatsoever, how you could ever imagine projecting that amount of money. You know what I mean? There's a lot of variables involved. And that's, like I said, that's still why I'm worried about Solo, because it obviously didn't have a small budget.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a budget for Solo. I'm having issues finding it. Maybe it hasn't really been divulged yet. Maybe more so when it comes out, when we start getting numbers, we might be having more accurate information as far as like, it made X amount and it was shot for this. Because like, for example, like Black Panther was a $200 million movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made over $1 billion.
Right.
That is a crazy percentage. Like, it is like more than it's working on quadrupling.
And that's funny too, because I could pick Black Panther apart because of its cinematography.
Sure.
It's too much blur. I'm not a big fan of blur.
Yeah. And we actually have talked about that as far as the cinematography on that movie. Like, it just a lot of times like when you do effects, it's one way to like kind of cover up for something not looking as like. Just imagine if Justice League just made Superman blurry. Mm-hmm. When they fixed his mustache. With as bad as that looks sometimes, I'm glad they just didn't make him blurry, because it would have made it worse. I mean, he is faster than a speeding bullet. He could have just been like,
I'm going to go shave this real quick.
Yeah, so nervous, right? But yeah, no, I can't find any sort of like thing about Solo's budget. I do wonder, because if he reshot 80% of the movie, that is pretty drastic.
That's definitely not cheap, because you're not just paying the actors for their screen time. You're paying the production crews, and you're paying the assistants bringing you coffee.
Yes.
Every couple of hours, which is obviously not a lot individually, but all that adds up, and that's, like I said, there's so many people involved in these projects now. There's 100 editors for one scene.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, it's stuff like that where these budgets are just going to keep going up and up.
And think about all these smaller companies that are filling in with effects shots, whether or not they're effects that we even notice or see. Because there was a guy that we worked with who is associated with a company out in California, and they worked on Black Panther. They did effect stuff for Black Panther.
That's cool.
Then they could only work on like so much of the movie at a time because they were being so secretive about spoilers and all that kind of stuff. And they were just given, okay, you work on this thing, and you have no other context. Do this, this, and this. And they said, okay, we'll do that. And so when they turn back in, then they get another scene. Okay, work on this. X amount of context. That's it. And that's very interesting to me because then when you go to the theaters and you see these big blockbuster movies, whether they're Star Wars or not, I mean, the credits are 10,000, years long. Like especially, and now, see, like Marvel has almost conditioned you to sit through them because you're waiting for that after credit. And now all these people who worked on this movie, you might see their name or,
they're at least getting recognized.
Exactly. And that's why I really do dig, like, after credit scenes are almost becoming like every movie has an after credit, but that's kind of like, I get it. Even DC on the Justice League did after credit scenes. They did 2 of them.
I saw the new 50 Shades of Grey movie a month ago. Yeah, in February.
Yeah.
It had an after credit scene.
Did it really?
So when you've got romance movies now popping in after credit scenes, you've set a trend, and people are sticking with it.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if we'll ever see that with Star Wars, because for so long, when a Star Wars movie is done when that iconic credit music hits. It's always the same music, no matter if it's a main movie, side movie, even video games,
right?
TV shows. It's always that same initial credit sequence, that coda, if you will, and it'd be so weird to have that happen. Oh, movie's over, but it's not over for Star Wars, because
I would love to see it personally.
It would be cool, but at the same time, it's like, to me, that's like end. They're so, like, you can tell your story within it, and you don't necessarily have to have it, but it does shed light on all these people,
Absolutely,
these talented people.
they deserve to get recognition.
Absolutely,
because the amount of work that they put in is leaps and bounds above, the amount of work that somebody puts in on a Star Wars movie. And I'm not going to say this with 100% certainty, but when you've got Disney, I don't want to say breathing down your neck, but when you've got Disney holding you accountable, when Kathleen Kennedy knows you by name as Scene 5, Take 2, Editor Number 3, Bob, Jimmy, Kathleen Kennedy knows you, that gives you incentive, not only to work harder, but then it's like, look at what I did. I might not have done much compared to the guy playing Han Solo, but I was a part of this and I did something.
And think about how much that fills them in. They're working in the industry. They're doing what I would assume is their dream job.
Absolutely.
Or at least to some extent. And they get to tell their family, I worked on a Star Wars movie.
Well,
I worked on this movie.
I'm very strong in my belief that we, as workers in today's workforce, should not seek validation in the things that we do. I think that's a bad habit to get into. But having if myself as an editor sat down and it's like, okay, I've watched the movie, I'm rolling through the credits, and it's like, whoa, hey, there's my name.
Yeah.
That's validation, unnecessary or otherwise, but that is a good feeling. It's like you see your name on the Employee of the Month board. Hey, look at that.
Yeah.
I did some stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, I don't mean to interrupt.
Go for it.
I've got an article from last November. All of the projections from a lot of companies are saying that Solo has somewhere around $150 million production budget.
Originally, or after everything's said and
this
done?
was during. This was right at the start of the reshoots.
Okay, so
from what this is saying, yeah.
So that is probably before reshoots, and then they allocated more money towards the project.
So,
So
Yeah.
we're not looking at like Pirates of the Caribbean record-breaking $330 million budget, but we're looking at least over a $200 million budget.
It would have to. So the big line here, the headline here, it says, nonetheless, the change in director and copious reshoots are absolutely going to add a pretty penny to what we have to assume was at least $150 million production. So these are obviously not hard numbers or facts. This is a prediction or kind of assumption, but I think 150 million at absolute minimum is what I would put it at. You know, if you're Disney, you're not gonna throw like what's a good one that I remember? Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes had a $90 million production budget, even with big name actors like Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law. You know, still was only $90 million. So I would say that's a reasonable figure as far as not having any of the facts.
I just saw this news article, not to change the subject, but just as like a late-breaking news type thing. It's just today as we record this. So so we're recording on Monday. It's coming on Friday. So hopefully it's still out there for you guys. Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it was more than a lot of controversy with the, like in the video game world as far as like the whole microtransactions and how it went about them.
It ruined that game.
It has been completely overhauled and changed now, apparently. But for PlayStation 4, you can pick up this game at Walmart for $20 right now.
Might be worth it for $20.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe. I don't know if I will because I never did pick up the original one. I played the beta and I was like, yeah, I'm good. You know, I kind of had my fill, but I mean.
Well, on that same topic, so I saw an article 2 days ago in the morning. We were on break, and it said that EA reintroduced the microtransactions to Battlefront 2, which they had taken out after fan backlash over the progression and, you know, the necessity of the microtransactions. Later that day, the same day after they reintroduced them, the second article that I read was EA accepts the mistake that they have made and again removes microtransactions from Star Wars Battlefront 2 and changes progression yet again.
Mm-hmm. I got some headlines here.
Go ahead.
Solo, a Star Wars story, actor details film's troubled production. So Lucasfilm shocked, you know, the whole transition, all the stuff we already kind of talked about. I'm trying to see who said it. Oh, a source who chose to remain anonymous. So apparently this person acted on the film, but they're not wanting to come out and say who they are. Phil and Chris are good directors, but they weren't prepared for Star Wars, a source who chose to remain anonymous shared with Vulture. After the 25th take, the actors are looking at each other like, this is getting weird. And Lord Miller seemed a bit out of control. They definitely felt the pressure with one of these movies, and there are so many people on top of you all the time. The first assistant director was really experienced and had to step in and help out to direct a lot of scenes. That's from when we're talking about the directors getting moved and getting them out of, like, you know, taken off the project. A lot of people just assumed that these guys were like the wronged ones in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
This is just kind of sharing a different side of the story, saying that these guys were ill-prepared for what they were signing up for. The directing duo previously helmed the Lego Movie and the 21 Jump Street films, which were more rooted in comedy and improvisation and innovation. A Star Wars film, on the other hand, has many more limiting factors that can be accomplished in any given scene, which reportedly contrasted with their directing styles. Howard, on the other hand, is an Academy Award-nominated director whose direction of the project changed the filming atmosphere almost immediately. When he came on, he took control, and you could feel it, the source confirmed. He got respect immediately. He's really confident and really easy guy to work with. Another reported issue with the film came before Lord and Miller's departure, with star Alden Ehrenreich requiring an acting coach to improve his take on the iconic character. According to the source, the acting coach had a major positive impact on his portrayal of Han Solo.
See, that's the complete opposite from that article that I read.
Right. Trying to mimic Harrison Ford is really tough, the source noted. Lucasfilm wanted something very specific, copying someone else. Old's not a bad actor. He's just not good enough, to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They added, you could see his acting became more relaxed. He became more Harrison-like. Ultimately, the source implied that Lucasfilm has a lot riding on Solo following the backlash The Last Jedi received from some audiences, in addition to its box office totals being slightly under opening weekend projections. They have to make Solo good after Last Jedi. It didn't make as much money as expected, the source pointed out. They want to keep making Star Wars movies. It has to be good. And, of course, it goes on to say that Solo comes out on May 25th.
I bet this is Donald Glover.
You think so?
I almost guarantee it.
I was instantly thinking it's Donald Glover or Woody Harrelson saying this.
It's got to be one of the two.
It just kind of sounds like it could be either one of our voices saying that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. It as I said, it paints it a whole different light for the directors. It definitely that paints them as not having control of the situation, them wanting to do their style, and them going, no, you can do a little bit, but we have a road to go on. And
well, I find it hard to believe that if you and I were Lord Miller and we sat down with Kathleen Kennedy and she's like, okay, this is what you've done. We would like to offer you the contract to do the Han Solo film. You understand this is a very big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the script, look it over. Or here's a portion of the script, look it over. Get back in contact with me and let me know kind of what you're thinking. I do not imagine Kathleen Kennedy saying, you have full control of this project in any way, shape, or form. I imagine her being very kind of concise and to the point and saying, here is our vision, this is what we expect. You do have creative freedom. You can ad-lib some stuff if you want. You can throw in, as you put it, sprinkle a little bit of your own flair on it. But this is the vision that we have.
mm-hmm.
This is what we expect. We as a company believe that you have the tools to do this.
It's also a little different considering that these two didn't help write this movie.
Right.
Because, I'm sitting here thinking as we're talking about this and how much control they actually had over the movie, and it definitely seems like they thought they had more than what they were given.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about J.J. Abrams or Rian Johnson, it definitely seems like when you're talking about those guys, like Episode 7, Episode 8, their movies, everything rides on them.
Right.
Everything you hear, it's like JJ's movie, Ryan's movie, and everyone's looking at Ryan's movies and the decisions that he made to be risky and make the movie that he made rides and falls on him. And it's like you're not hearing that with this project. You're not saying like the sole success of that movie rides on these guys directors and their vision of the story and the story, because they didn't write the story. Kazdan and Kazdan's son
right
wrote the story. And it's their job to then adapt that. Whereas when you had Episode 7 was written by Kazdan and JJ.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had Rian Johnson. And I think he wrote Last Jedi with somebody else, but I can't remember his name.
I can't remember his name either.
But
I think part of that, though, is you as a production company, if you're wanting... Let's step outside of the kind of Star Wars box. If you're just going to do a science fiction movie and you are, you're at the board and you're like, okay, who do we want to get to direct this movie? And you look at all the major sci-fi films, we'll just say of the last decade. Why would you think of anyone before J.J. Abrams? Look at the success that he had with the Star Trek films.
Yeah.
And he is J.J. Abrams fits very well, I would say, into the Disney Lucasfilm culture. He's not a difficult guy to get along with from what I've read and seen interviews with. He's a very easygoing guy. He takes direction very well. kind of from people higher up, but he walks on set and he kind of commands that presence or that respect and presence already because I'm seasoned. I know sci-fi. I might not know Star Wars 100%, but I know sci-fi enough that, cut me a little slack here, let's let this play out, and then you'll be able to see what I'm trying to get at. And the same thing with Rian Johnson. He's a fantastic director. So when you've got two, I would call them underexperienced. You've got 21 Jump Street,
Lego movie.
I can't in good conscience compare 21 Jump Street to the original Star Trek movie. I can't compare the Lego movie.
Well, think about like the sheer size and scope.
Absolutely.
Of not just the movie, but then all these effects and all this stuff that you're doing. When they hired JJ, they knew what they were hiring him for, and they knew what he was. And they knew that he was a super fan, and that's not to say these guys are fans, but he knew what they're looking for, and his vision to match that. And then with Ryan, and they're bringing him in, and they're working with him, and they're digging what he's putting down. Hence, like that, there wasn't a butting of heads there. They liked what he did so much that before it even came out, they gave him more movies and said, "You just did something really awesome."
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I have another article about Andy Serkis recalls how he learned about Supreme Leader Snoke's fate. And, of course, that was a pretty divisive thing among fans.
Very controversial.
One of the biggest surprises fans witnessed in The Last Jedi was the demise of Supreme Leader Snoke at the hands of Kylo Ren.
I still don't think he's dead. I just want to throw that out there.
Sure. I mean, is that my kid?
Yeah.
Folks, if you've listened to this podcast network before, we've all got kids, dogs, cats, and they like to make surprise appearances on the podcast by yelling, barking, or meowing at the door. My kid is probably out there being very unruly, doing stuff he's not supposed to be doing, which is typical for a toddler.
Barking, yelling, and meowing at the door.
Back to this, though. Andy Serkis, he recalls that the first time he read the scene was left him in a state of semi-shock. He said he was taken to his trailer on the lot at Pinewood Studios where he was to read the script for the first time on a tablet. He says we were never handed scripts and had to hand back the tablet as soon as we were done.
I can kind of see that, though. If I'm Andy Serkis, I take that back to my trailer. I leave my trailer. I might leave the script laying next to my sink in my trailer. A production assistant walks in, grabs a hold of the script, and they're like, "Oh shit, look what I've got here. Let me get my smartphone out that has a camera."
Even if they only get a few pages.
And then that instantly goes on Reddit, goes on the internet, and then it blows up, and then Disney's like, "What the hell has happened?"
Fucking Circus.
How could you let this happen?
Yeah.
And then, so I can, even though it's a little bit Big Brother-ish, I can see that.
All right, so he says, where was I at? I was swiping through the story and landed on this epic scene where Snoke is goading Kylo Ren to kill Rey to fulfill his destiny. It was riveting. The tension building with each line. I just couldn't work out where it was heading. And then I swiped up, and there it was. The end. Not for Rey. Not for Kylo Ren, but for the Supreme Leader. Just gone. Not only did the weight of this character's death weigh heavily on the actor, but also the pressures on keeping the details a secret. I walked out of the trailer in a state of semi-shock, feeling the weight of knowing I would have to mask a great secret for a very, very long time. And that, my brother, a massive Star Wars fan, was going to be heartbroken. That isn't to say that Serkis wasn't happy with the final film, as he admired the directions that Rian Johnson took with the film. I love what Ryan did, he admitted. I thought it was a brilliant scene. One of the most disappointing elements of not getting to play Snoke again, potentially, is that getting to tap into that primal evil helped the actor purge negative emotions from his life. There's something delicious getting yourself into such a dark place. It's very much examining the darkest parts of yourself in a safe environment. It's actually very good therapy.
That's really good to hear because, with the whole Heath Ledger thing and how playing the Joker led to his untimely death, it's really kind of heartwarming to hear that somebody who's going through some stuff can kind of dive into a character and kind of leave that behind thanks to an imaginary thing. We all as people deal so much with mental health and illness. As the years go on, we figure out that our brains are a very flawed thing and are not meant to deal with a lot of the stuff that we have to deal with as individuals in our lives. It's really I hate to use the word heartwarming, but it makes you feel good to hear that Andy Serkis of all people, a superstar in the film industry, he might not be Brad Pitt or George Clooney walking down the street, but when Andy Serkis shows up, if Andy Serkis walked into a coffee shop, everyone in that coffee shop's going to know who he is because he's done so much, and everything that he's done is so good.
Yeah.
He's pioneered mocap, which is now motion performance, as he calls it. But he pioneered it. He's done more than anybody, and he's the most recognizable of. And I don't want to take anything away from motion performance actors, but he is the most recognizable of anybody right now, I think.
Well, I mean, he's definitely paved the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, with his most recent Apes films,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he really knocked it out of the park with some of these performances that they were able to translate onto an imaginary thing that's not even there.
Right.
It's crazy.
I really dig Andy Serkis. He's a really down to earth dude,
Same.
but he wants perfection in what he's doing.
And, of course, apparently, just to tap off of the Snoke thing, they intentionally kept it secretive. Apparently, there was almost an order kind of handed down. You know how we said Ryan had all these he had all this control. Apparently, there was an order handed down saying, "Don't reveal too much because we want to keep some close to the chest, just in case we want to do a book or a movie or a prequel or something that might tie into that character, and we might be able to cash into that later on."
Well, that scene is so powerful in itself. The whole red, as Nate called it, the red room scene.
Oh, man. That gave me chills watching that.
Absolutely. But, if I'm Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver, and I'm going to shoot this scene for the first time, and I may not know that I'm about to kill Snoke or witness Snoke being killed, and then that's what the director calls for, and it's like, oh shit, and you get real emotion. I don't imagine that it was done in one take by any means, but you get to see that real raw emotion, and that's rare a lot of times.
One thing that I'll add on to what Serkis said, there was true real tension. I'm sitting on the edge of my seat in a theater thinking, how is this going to go?
Right.
And you're wondering, you're like, as he's describing everything that supposedly Kylo's doing, like, is he really? And then the saber goes off. You're like, and that is something that I feel like that they, even if you disagree with how and what they killed him with, it's shocking.
It's so powerful.
It is so shocking. And then, like the saber flies up and then she catches it and then they're fighting all these guards and it's an awesome epic scene. They're fighting together in tandem.
Mm-hmm.
And then for a fleeting second, you're like, did he just turn? Did he just turn to the light to not kill her? Because the whole previous movie was him being pulled and pulled and pulled. And then him killing his dad was part of cementing the fact, no, this is me, damn it. I'm dark side.
Right.
He wanted it so much that, he tearfully killed his dad. He did not want to, but he had to.
Mm-hmm.
And now here we are and now his slow emotional buildup with Rey that they did throughout the movie with the two of them doing the Force Connect thing that Snoke was a part of, pulling him
Force FaceTime,
pulling him to the light, and then you're like, did he? What's this mean? And then at the end you see it, and then he uses it to grasp power, and assert himself further into the dark side. You're like, there was a pull.
And he resisted it.
And he resisted it, just like the you we've always seen on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's trying to pull her in. And there's genuine emotion. He cares about her.
Well, and there's good foreshadowing in the scene on or when Luke and Rey are in the Jedi Temple and she's doing her little meditation, floating rocks, the whole shebang, and Luke is terrified, and the first thing he says is, "You went straight to the dark. You didn't even resist it." That is perfect foreshadowing for the Red Room scene, because Kylo extends his hand, "Join me," and she resists it. She
remembered her failure.
Yep.
Just like, and that's a callback to stuff we've seen in like Empire, where, each time that Luke, failed, when he's getting ready to leave and Yoda and Obi-Wan are trying to tell him, don't go. And finally, when they realize there's no talking him out of it, Yoda's like, remember your failure at the cave. You gave in there. Do not give in now, please. Don't. And Luke didn't. Speaking of Luke, I think this is going to be the last thing that we're going to talk about here today. Mark Hamill reveals George Lucas's shocking ending to Star Wars Episode 9.
That's interesting.
Star Wars creator George Lucas intended for Jedi Master Luke Skywalker to die at the end of Episode 9, according to Mark Hamill. I happen to know that George didn't kill Luke until the end of 9 after he trained Leia, which is another thread that was never really played upon in Last Jedi. Leia's Luke's sister was trained as a Jedi Knight and in the since discarded canon of the original extended universe. Hamill's revelation marks the first time that it was learned that Lucas originally intended to close the episodic Skywalker saga with Luke's death. The Last Jedi writer-director Rian Johnson killed Luke by its end. The disillusioned Jedi spawning a forced projection of himself, of course, in that movie. Exhausted after doing all that, Luke died with peace and purpose in front of the twin suns and faded away. Sort of like closing his arc at the beginning of the twin suns and then at the end. Beautiful cinematography.
Absolutely.
George had an overall arc. If he didn't have all the details, he sort of had an overall feel for where the sequel trilogy was going. But this was more like a relay race, Hamill said, of the sequel trilogy, which was first marked out by J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan for Force Awakens before being handed off to Johnson. You run and hand a torch off to the next guy, and he picks it up and goes. He's talking about how George originally had like this plan, and now with this new sequel trilogy, you had JJ doing all this work and leading up, and now he's like, hey, Ryan, you go do stuff with it, and Ryan does all this work and does this stuff, and he goes, here you go, back at you, and now JJ's going to come in and do whatever he wants to do to finish it off, and
it'll be really interesting to see, I don't want to say retcon, but how much stuff he tries to steer down a different path.
It's going to be interesting because he has the freedom to do so. Just kind of like how everyone always imagined, like, what's Luke doing? Oh my gosh, how's he going to react to seeing his lightsaber? And who would have thought he just throws it across the like down the cliff? Who would have thought that? But it made for a great moment. It made for a great laugh. It's like, wait, what? And honestly, what a great opening scene for that to get across right away.
I'm done with this shit.
No. And everyone's like, wait, what? And that's exactly the point, is that you're getting introduced to a very much different Luke Skywalker than who you last saw in Return of the Jedi. He's a very different person.
One thing that I would really enjoy, I would like to sit down, if I could get my hands on it, and read George Lucas's original kind of screenplays for his prequel trilogy, because from everything that I've read over the last 15 years, that he had everything, I don't want to say finalized, but he had the basic framework, a lot of story written for what his original sequel trilogy to the original trilogy was going to be. And then, there's the expanded universe stuff where the Empire was building the Death Star to prepare for the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. That's something that a lot of young people don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
It's this terrible alien race that was coming in to wipe out all existing life and enslave and, do all kinds of stuff. More parallels with the United States and modern warfare and all kinds of other stuff. But it would be really interesting to see after episode 9 if that would be something that, because he's got it. It's in his vault somewhere.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting to see him release that and be like, well, I'm glad you guys have all enjoyed this trilogy of movies, good, bad, or indifferent. Here's what I originally planned for it.
It'd be really neat to see him kind of release that and put that out there for people to read. Even just
because people would flock to that in
would
droves. Yeah.
Lastly, with what Luke says is that Mark,
we know him as Luke.
Yeah. He said ultimately Luke's fate is in JJ's hands. Whatever, if JJ wants to do anything with him going forward, it's all him. Explaining that he would like to see him return as a Force ghost, or as he put, frightening Force ghost.
Yeah, I don't know that I want Luke to be a frightening Force ghost, but I've told you many times as we've discussed Star Wars, I would love to see, Rey finishes out the movie Episode 8 with the Jedi texts, so the Jedi live on through her and through those books. Yoda's obviously still kicking around in the astral plane,
as we just saw, yeah.
Doing his Force ghost stuff. I would love to see, maybe she's in a moment of meditation, or she's actually reading the Jedi text, something that Yoda eloquently put it as not being a page turner. Page turners, they are not.
That was that is probably my favorite scene out of the entire.
Oh, it was great, but it would be really, a really good kind of Easter egg. Right? Easter egg's not a bad, or is a bad way to put it. Like, kind of taking care of the fans. If, say, she's sitting on the Falcon or somewhere, just thumbing through these texts, and Yoda pops up next to her, and then Obi-Wan pops up, and then Luke pops up, and then Qui-Gon pops up. And maybe not all at the same time, but all of these really influential Jedi Masters, maybe even Mace Windu, Luke is her teacher, whether he wanted it or not. If he appeared to her as a Force ghost, and Yoda appeared to her as a Force ghost, and then it's like, remember that voice you heard in Maz's castle when you... I'm going to say that when you hear Obi-Wan as the echoes of the Force, when she grabs the lightsaber for the first time, that she actually heard that too. That's not just a thing for fans.
Yeah.
Because
it said, Rey, these are your first steps. And
right.
It was calling out, in a way, whether or not it is intended for him to have any relation to her, whether it's family or otherwise,
right,
as theorized by a lot of fans. But that was done to reach out to her and awaken what's inside of her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But to continue Yoda's spiel about failure and Luke's final understanding and acceptance of what failure is, and how even though he puts it perfectly, the hubris of the Jedi, how that was necessary in a way to get them to where they are, and kind of build a new groundwork and improve. How powerful would that be to have Luke say, well, this is Master Yoda,
mm-hmm.
and this is Master Obi-Wan. These two taught me how to be who I am. I failed them. Obi-Wan failed Yoda. Yoda failed Qui-Gon. Obviously Qui-Gon was not Yoda's master, but...
Right.
So I think that would be really neat to see. And then like you said, Hayden Christensen, coming back as Anakin or Vader.
I would love to see Anakin, because I would love to see him appear to Kylo, and be like him, almost kind of be like, "Hey, I've been where you are.
You're doing it wrong, man."
Yeah, don't. And then of course Kylo and his arrogance. I'm gonna be better than you, stronger than you. I've already ousted my dude.
You underestimate my power.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, I've heard this voice before. I've heard it all before.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "You will fall." You're predicting it, right? He goes, "You will fall if you continue down your path."
Yep. I would love to see any morsel of either of those things, if not both.
Now, I did read recently where it's in the expanded universe, which is no longer canon, but Anakin appears shortly after the Battle of Endor to Leia, and she's like coming home and to her residence, and there in the dark room is just this figure with like long hair, and she's like, "Who is in my house?" or whatever, and then she realizes that she could see through him, and he introduces himself as her father, and she's like, "Get out." Well, first she whispers Vader, then "Get out," and then he's like, he goes, "Look, I may not be able to come to you ever again, because you've been sort of awakened to your Force sensitivities. It's how I'm able to come to you right now. Because I don't know if there's ever going to be enough or better time or a time at all where I'll be come to see you again. I want your forgiveness. I have been forgiven. That's why I'm able to be here. But it's important to me that you forgive me." Basically she is offended by this.
How dare you?
You have. I fought with my very life and breath against you, and now I'm insulted by the fact that knowing that I am your father, or that you're my father,
right?
And he's just like, it's so important to Anakin. It's like, I failed, I messed up. I am not that guy. And in the end, she's like, I might be able to forgive you for torturing me all those years ago, but I can never forgive you for torturing Han.
That's powerful stuff.
And it sort of ends like that. And, eventually, apparently, she finds and reads diaries of Shmi. Or is that how you say her name?
Yeah, Shmi.
Anakin's mom, and the diary is descriptions and stories of when Anakin was a kid, and then she's able to sort of digest the fact that he wasn't always this person, and she's able to accept the fact that Anakin was lured and tempted by the dark side and became someone else.
Right.
And at that point, only then could she forgive Anakin.
Not Vader.
It's just very interesting because, as we saw in the altered versions, the Force Ghost version that is appeared, because I don't know if it's ever really stated if they're allowed to appear the way they want, or if they appear the way they were when they were last in the light.
Or it could be a perception thing.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan appears to Luke as old Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan Qui-Gon might have appeared to Obi-Wan on Tatooine as young Qui-Gon. Even though that's not how he himself is appearing, that's how the individual is perceiving them.
And that's one reason why I heard that perhaps they originally in the script for Last Jedi it wasn't Yoda, it was Obi-Wan. Because who better to teach a lesson to Luke than his original teacher?
Right.
And have that moment between the two, but they were like, well, Luke never saw him as a young man. And he's always saw him as the older wise man. And of course, now the only actor we have around to play him is Ewan McGregor, which you could make him look older and have a different perception. But I mean, if you're going to utilize Ewan McGregor, utilize him as the way that he would have looked towards the end of the run there, at least. And you could always do it just kind of like how they did when they just input young Anakin and over Sebastian Shaw or whatever his name was, like the original guy at the end who played Vader, or old Anakin, or Curly from the Three Stooges.
All of it.
You could easily just and have Luke not even react to it. It's like, oh yeah, you're Obi-Wan. But they decided, well, it might actually make more sense and be more powerful if it was Yoda.
Well, Yoda taught Luke more than Obi-Wan ever did.
Oh, of course.
Obi-Wan was only with Luke, obviously throughout Luke's childhood, very briefly.
But he only taught him the real basics and early
over a couple of hours.
Yeah.
So.
And when you think about that, and when you think about his entry into this whole new world, people were critical of how much time Rey spent, and she spent more time with Luke than he spent with Obi-Wan.
Yep, absolutely.
And then how long was Luke even with Yoda for?
Maybe a couple of days at the most.
Maybe a week, and because we're not really too sure on how long Leia and Han and the others were on the run for. How long were they at Cloud? Because it seems like they were at Cloud City for only a couple of hours, less than a day, before finally they got turned over to the Empire. But I would love to see Anakin come back as a Force. I would love to see the others. Ultimately, it has to be Luke, even if they do nothing else. Luke, I think, has to make one more appearance.
Well, I think if they're going to have Luke, they need to have Yoda also.
That would be
because
awesome.
They've already had Yoda. And, we've talked about in our review of Last Jedi how Yoda is still being the teacher to Luke.
Yes.
He's kind of poking him and prodding him and laughing at him. Because Yoda has a really good character development that a lot of people don't key in on. He changes a lot in his isolation.
Well, think about how much of failure he has to ponder on himself, and how much of that he goes, what did I do wrong? Because the wisdom that he's imparting onto Luke, he learned that.
That's right. So, especially, if Luke attains the power, or I would say the discipline to become a Force ghost, especially, based on Rey's need. Obviously, she still needs instruction, and the texts aren't, I don't think, enough for the story. But if we only got Luke and Yoda, that would be fine. If we only got Luke, that would be fine. I would love to see Ewan McGregor, and maybe a little bit of Qui-Gon action in there. But
it would be awesome. But as far as it's the same reason why Yoda appeared to Luke and not Qui-Gon. That's because of the story is important for that. But
maybe at the end of the movie, say the end of. We're going to finally send the trilogy off, and this is the end, and Rey is going to start her own Jedi temple. Who better to have there as advisors than some of the greatest Jedi masters in history? I think if it was just an image, no dialogue or anything, that would be a perfect time to put in Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. So,
and that also begs
there's so many different things you can do.
That also begs the question, and I think we're going to leave it with this. That's if this movie trilogy ends on a positive note.
Right.
It's going to be interesting because they took the hourglass and literally turned it completely upside down and reset the flow with this Last Jedi movie. And I feel like we're going to get that again. And it's not going to be as easy to predict the ending. Maybe it will be a happy ending for everybody.
Well, what's your thought? I mean, just basic throwing it on the wall and see if it sticks. Positive or negative?
Man. I can almost see bittersweet.
I could see that too. I think that even with movies like Rogue One, as they're embracing on the beach, accepting their impending doom.
So powerful.
That's such a powerful scene, and I'm really glad they did it that way. I'm glad it was not, we magically found out how to escape this planet as it's being destroyed by the Death Star. We zoomed away in a ship that we stole. I'm really glad they didn't do it that way, because life as we know it is not all sunshine and rainbows. Life in their version of existence is definitely not sunshine and rainbows. So I personally would appreciate a bittersweet ending. I do not see them doing it with Rey's character, though.
I just wonder, I kind of see the bittersweet ending with Kylo's character, with Ben's character more, where maybe he turns in the end, but he's not.
It's too far gone.
Yeah,
I could see that.
Maybe for those of you who are really nerds, like the Kuja character in Final Fantasy IX, where he does all this evil shit and all this bad shit, and in the end he kind of saves everybody, and with some of his last energy that he has, and then you're like, oh my god, he's saved, he did something good, and she's like, come with me, and he's like, I can't. And she's like, of course she's like, no, come on, yes, come on, grab my hand, and he's like, this has got to end here. I think that would be pretty cool and
Yeah.
powerful, especially when you have a character who has been repeatedly pulled to the light.
Yeah, pulled back and forth.
Yeah.
You know,
And now he's the sole dude. He's the head dude, and now he has all that weight on him, and he's known for making erratic, crazy decisions that are not necessarily popular with some of his underlings. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Oh man, we got to wait so long after Solo for that.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But the good thing is we've got Solo not long from now.
You are right, and we're going to look at that again here in another month as we get closer. Maybe we'll get another trailer for Infinity War to talk about. I hope so. But I think that's going to wrap it up for us here today. Thank you guys for joining us. This has been an awesome first episode. Great talk, great discussion with my good friend Tyler. And I want to thank you guys for joining us here for our free first premiere episode on the Journey into Comics Network. Of course, you can find that at journeyintocomics.com and on podcast services across the globe on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. You can check out the archives over on YouTube. You can check us out on social media, Journey into Comics Network on Facebook. And you can also check us out on Twitter, JIC Network on Twitter. We're also like all across the place on Instagrams and stuff like that. You expect to see more and updates where to find this podcast over on patreon.com/journeyintocomics. That's where we're going to be for here going forward. Episode 2 is going to be over there, and you guys will definitely hear and know about it, whether you're listening to the network. It's going to be plugged heavily. We definitely want you guys to come and follow us over there, and we hope that you do. And we look forward to growing and talking more, nerding out more about Star Wars with you guys over there. And until then, I guess, I've been Brando.
I've been Tyler.
May the Force be with you. Have a good one.